She looks more like a homeless person than a first-class passenger. Pause. The mocking laughter echoed from across the aisle as Anna Miller pulled her hoodie over her head, dozing off in seat 12C. To the passengers, she was nothing but a pale, ordinary shadow. Pause. But what if the person you judged was the only one who could save you? Pause, let it sink in. Stay with Whisper Fable, because this story's about to take off. The plane, an international red-eye slicing through the A. Night at 36,000 feet, bound for New York from London. The business-class cabin buzzed with quiet wealth. Men in tailored suits tapping laptops, women in silk scarves scrolling phones, a politician in the back sipping bourbon like it was his job. Anna sat by the window, her faded jeans tucked under. Her sneakers scuffed and worn, the laces frayed at the ends. Her gray hoodie, threadbare at the cuffs, hung loose over her slight frame. No makeup touched her face, and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, a few strands slipping free. Cheap earbuds dangled from her neck, the kind you'd grab from a gas station for a couple bucks. She looked like she'd wandered into the wrong cabin, and the passengers noticed. Their glances were sharp, cutting, like her presence was a personal insult to their carefully curated world. The little girl in 12B, a 6-year-old with pigtails and a unicorn backpack, was coloring a picture of a pony, her crayons scattered across the tray table. Her mother, Ellen, with a sleek bob and a pearl necklace that screamed old money, kept a tight smile as she watched her daughter, Lily. When Lily's water cup tipped over, splashing Anna's sleeve, Ellen gasped. "Oh, honey, be careful," she said, grabbing a napkin and dabbing at Anna's hoodie. Her apology was quick, almost too quick, and her eyes flicked over Anna's clothes, her lips pursing slightly. Across the aisle, a businessman in a pin-striped suit, Richard Holt, leaned toward his colleague, a younger guy with a Rolex. "She looks more homeless than first class," Richard said, his voice low but carrying through the cabin. His colleague, Derek, chuckled, adjusting his tie. "Probably used points. No way she's a paying customer." Anna didn't move. She just pulled her damp sleeve closer, her fingers brushing the worn fabric, and leaned toward the window. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing steady, like the laughter hadn't touched her, but her hand rested on her small backpack, tucked under the seat. And for a moment, her fingers tightened on the strap, a flicker of tension in her grip. The flight attendant, Josh, a young guy with a crisp uniform and a practiced smile, passed by, his eyes catching on Anna's earbuds. His eyebrow twitched. Just for a second, but it was enough to say what he thought. She didn't belong here. Not among the elite. Not in this cabin of power and privilege. Ellen glanced at Lily, then at Anna, her voice soft but pointed. "She's fine, sweetie, just resting." Lily, her crayon paused mid-stroke, whispered, innocent curious, "Why is her jacket so old?" Ellen shushed her, but the question lingered, unanswered, heavy in the air. A man in a navy blazer, his hair slicked back, sat a row ahead, his laptop open to a spreadsheet. He turned to his seatmate, a woman with diamond earrings, and muttered, smug, "I bet she's a charity case, some airline giveaway for the less fortunate." The woman smirked, her earrings catching the light as she nodded. "Explains the sneakers. They look like they've been through a war." Their laughter was soft, but it carried, slicing through the cabin's hum. Anna's fingers paused on her backpack, her thumb brushing a small, faded patch sewn onto the side, a pair of wings crossed with a sword, barely noticeable unless you knew what it meant. She shifted slightly, her shoulder pressing against the window, her face hidden in the shadow of her hoodie. The cabin lights dimmed and the passengers settled into their routines, oblivious to the weight of that patch, the history it carried. But what happens when the sky itself demands the truth? Buckle up with Whisper Fable, because Anna's about to rewrite this story. The cabin settled into a quiet rhythm. the engine's hum blending with the clink of glasses and the rustle of newspapers. A woman in a red blazer, Claire Donovan, a socialite with 1 million followers on X, sat 2 rows ahead, flipping through a fashion magazine with a smirk. She leaned toward her seatmate, Mark Ellison, a tech CEO in a cashmere sweater, his gold watch glinting under the lights. Sharp, mocking. "I bet she's in the wrong section," Claire whispered. "Look at those sneakers." Mark nodded, sipping his wine. Amused. "Someone should tell her, this isn't Coach." A few other passengers overheard, their heads turning to glance. At Anna, their smiles thin and cruel. Anna stayed still, her hoodie pulled tight, her eyes fixed on the dark window, the reflection of the cabin flickering across her face. To them she was nothing, a shadow, a nobody, someone who didn't know her place. Lily kept stealing glances at Anna, her small hands clutching her coloring book. She leaned close to Ellen, whispering, soft, sincere. "She's nice, Mommy. She didn't get mad about the water." Ellen forced a smile, patting Lily's head. But her eyes stayed on Anna, a mix of pity and unease in her gaze. Anna's hand moved to her backpack again, her fingers tracing the wings and sword patch. Her lips pressed tight, just for a second, then relaxed. The plane droned on, the passengers lost in their own worlds, unaware of the weight Anna carried. Across the aisle, a woman in a tailored skirt, a corporate lawyer named Susan Grayson, adjusted her glasses and whispered to her assistant. Dismissive. "She's probably some intern who got lucky with a free ticket." Her assistant nodded, stifling. A laugh. The judgment spread like a ripple, each passenger adding their own quiet jab, their voices weaving a net of disdain around Anna's silent figure. "Hey, if this story's hitting you where it hurts, maybe you've felt those stares, heard those whispers, been judged for something as small as what you wear. Can you do Whisper Fable a quick favor? Grab your phone, hit that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It means everything to share these moments with you, to walk through the pain and the strength together." All right, let's keep going. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, a sharp jolt that made the overhead bins rattle and a few drinks slosh. Passengers gasped, their hands gripping armrests, but the moment passed and the cabin relaxed. Richard Holt went back to his laptop, muttering about delayed emails. Claire Donovan snapped a selfie, angling her phone to catch the cabin's luxury. The politician in the back, Senator Harold Vance, sipped his bourbon, his eyes scanning the passengers like he was sizing them up. Anna stayed still, her hoodie pulled low, her breathing slow and even. Lily started humming softly, her crayon scratching out a new picture, a plane soaring through clouds. Anna's hand rested on her armrest, her fingers tapping lightly, almost imperceptibly, like she was counting something only she could hear. The rhythm was steady, practiced, like a pilot running through a checklist before takeoff. A man in a linen suit, his face tanned from a recent yacht trip, leaned across the aisle to Richard Holt. "You think she's one of those budget travelers? Who snuck up here?" Richard smirked, closing his laptop with a snap. "Probably. Look at that backpack. I've seen better at a thrift store." The laughter spread, a low hum of agreement from nearby seats. Anna's fingers stopped tapping. She reached down, pulling her backpack closer, her movement slow, deliberate. A small keychain dangled from the zipper, a tiny metal jet, no bigger than a quarter, glinting faintly under the cabin lights. She tucked it out of sight, her face still hidden by her hoodie, but her shoulders stiffened, just enough to notice. The man in the linen suit didn't see it. He was already back to his phone, scrolling through photos of his vacation, oblivious to the weight of his words. The plane's hum grew louder for a moment, the engine straining slightly, then settling back. A woman in a silk scarf, her perfume heavy in the air, turned to her husband, a banker with a pocket square. "I don't get why they let people like her in business class. It lowers the whole experience." Her husband nodded, adjusting his cufflinks. Gruff standards are slipping. In 12C, Anna's hand paused on her backpack, her fingers brushing the zipper, where a small tear in the fabric revealed a glimpse of something inside, a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. She zipped it closed, her movements precise, and leaned her head back, her eyes fixed on the window. The cabin lights cast her reflection, her face calm, but her jaw tight, like she was holding something back. Then the intercom crackled, sharp and urgent. "Attention, this is your captain. We require immediate medical or piloting assistance. Is there a pilot on board?" Pause. The words cut through the cabin like a blade. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. People twisted in their seats, their voices rising in a frantic hum. Richard Holt slammed his laptop shut, his face pale. Panicked. "What the hell does that mean?" Claire Donovan dropped her phone, her hand trembling. "This isn't happening, Senator." Vance set his glass down, his jaw tight, but he didn't move. Ellen pulled Lily close, her voice shaking. "It's okay, honey. It's okay." But her eyes were wide, darting around the cabin. Josh rushed down the aisle, his face drained of color. "Is there a doctor or a pilot here? Anyone, please?" No one stood. The air felt thick, the cabin shrinking under the weight of fear. Anna stirred. In 12C. Her eyes opened, slow and steady, like she'd been waiting for this. She sat up, pulling her hoodie down, her movements calm, deliberate. She reached for her backpack, unzipping it to pull out a small, folded piece of paper. She tucked it into her pocket, her fingers brushing the wings and sword patch. Then she stood, her sneakers quiet on the carpeted aisle. Richard Holt caught sight of her and scoffed. "Don't tell me she thinks she can help." Claire Donovan let out a sharp laugh, her lipstick smudged from nervous biting. Sarcastic. "That girl? She probably can't even drive a car." Mark Ellison leaned forward, his watch glinting. "Don't make things worse, sweetheart. This isn't a game." Lily clutched her mother's arm, her voice small, soft, confused. "Why are they being mean?" Ellen didn't answer, her eyes fixed on Anna, a flicker of doubt in her gaze. A man in a polo shirt, his face red from too much wine, stood up, blocking Anna's path. "Sit down, kid. You're going to make this worse for everyone." The passengers around him nodded, their murmurs growing louder, a chorus of disbelief and scorn. Anna stopped, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment. She didn't speak, but her gaze was steady, unyielding, like she was looking through him. The man faltered, stepping back, his bravado crumbling under her silence. Anna moved past him, her steps measured, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Josh hesitated, his eyes flicking. From her sneakers to her hoodie. "Ma'am, please, we need someone qualified." Susan Grayson chimed in from 2 rows back, her glasses glinting. "Sleeping through the whole flight, and now she wants to be a hero?" Laughter followed, cruel and biting, rolling through the seats like a wave. Anna didn't look at them. She stepped into the aisle, her shoulders squared, her face unreadable. A woman in a cashmere coat, her purse monogrammed with gold initials, leaned toward her friend. "She's delusional. Thinks she's some kind of action movie star." Her friend snickered, adjusting her diamond bracelet. Anna's hand tightened on her backpack strap just for a moment, then relaxed. She looked at Josh, her voice low but clear. "I flew F-18s. Take me to the cockpit." The words hit the cabin like a shockwave. The laughter died, replaced by a stunned silence. Richard Holt's jaw dropped, his drink halfway to his lips. Claire Donovan blinked, her phone forgotten in her lap. "F-18s?" someone muttered. An older man in the back, Tom, a retired Marine with a faded insignia on his jacket, shot to his feet. "That's a Navy jet. Only naval aviators fly those." Josh stared at Anna, his mouth open, then nodded quickly. "This way." He motioned toward the cockpit. The crowd parted, some reluctantly, others too stunned to move. Susan Grayson muttered, This is insane. But her voice was quieter now, less certain. Anna walked past them, her steps steady, her backpack slung over one shoulder. A woman in a tailored blazer, her hair pulled back tight, whispered to her seatmate, "She's lying." "No way. A girl like that flew fighter jets." Her seatmate nodded, but his eyes followed Anna, a flicker of doubt in his gaze. Anna's sneakers moved silently down the aisle, but her presence seemed to fill the cabin, shifting the air. Lily watched her go, her small hands clutching her coloring book, her eyes wide with something like hope. Ellen pulled her close, but her own hands trembled, her earlier pity replaced by a quiet unease. The cockpit door opened, and the air inside felt heavy, like the plane itself was holding its breath. The captain was slumped in his seat, unconscious, his face pale and slick with sweat. The co-pilot, Ryan, a young guy with a buzz cut, gripped the controls, his knuckles white. He glanced at Anna and frowned. "You? A civilian woman?" Outside, passengers pressed close to the door, their voices leaking through. Panicked, "Don't put our lives in her hands!" Susan Grayson shouted, her tone high with panic. "If she messes up, we all die." Ryan's eyes flicked to Anna's hoodie, her sneakers, then back to the controls. Soft, uncertain. "You sure you know what you're doing?" Anna didn't answer. She slid into the captain's seat, her hands moving over the controls with a quiet confidence that made Ryan pause. Her fingers brushed a small, worn ring on her left hand, barely noticeable, but her thumb lingered there for a moment, like it anchored her. A memory flickered, sharp and vivid. A dusty airbase, the sun beating down, the roar of jets overhead. Anna, younger, her hair pulled back tight, stood in front of an F-18, her call sign stitched on her flight suit, Night Viper 12. Her commanding officer clapped her shoulder, his voice gruff. "You're the best we've got, Miller." She had nodded, her eyes on the jet, her heart steady. Then the mission, the explosion, the report that said she didn't make it. She'd walked away from that life, from the medals, from the name. Now, in the cockpit, her hands moved like they had never left. The plane steadied, the horizon leveling out. Ryan stared, his mouth half open, like he was seeing her for the first time. Outside, the passengers' shouts grew quieter, but the tension remained, a heavy weight pressing against the cockpit door. The plane lurched, a sudden dip that sent a tray clattering in the galley. The passengers screamed, their voices a chaotic roar. Anna's eyes stayed fixed on the instruments, her fingers steady as she adjusted the yoke. Ryan watched her, his doubt starting to crack. She reached for the radio, her voice calm, like she was ordering coffee. "This is Night Viper 12, requesting clearance." The words hit the air traffic control tower like a bomb. There was a long pause. Then a voice crackled back, frantic. Shocked. "Night Viper 12? Impossible. You were declared KIA 5 years ago." Ryan's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide. Outside, the passengers fell silent, Susan Grayson's shouts dying in her throat. Tom whispered to his seatmate, "She's a ghost." Anna didn't react. She kept talking to the tower, her voice steady, guiding the plane through the shaking. Her hand brushed the folded paper in her pocket, the edges crinkling softly, and her jaw tightened, just for a moment, before she refocused on the controls. Woman in a velvet jacket, her hair streaked with silver, stood near the cockpit door, her voice rising above the others. "This is a mistake. She's nobody. You're risking our lives for a nobody." Her words sparked a murmur of agreement, passengers, nodding, their fear feeding their scorn. Anna's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn. Her fingers moved faster now, adjusting dials, her eyes scanning the radar. The woman's voice grew louder, shrill. "I paid for this flight. I deserve better than this." Josh pushed her back gently, his face strained. Firm. "Ma'am, please, let her work." Anna's hand paused on the yoke, her thumb brushing the worn ring again, and for a split second her lips parted, like she might say something, but she didn't. She just kept flying, her silence louder than the woman's screams. The radar screen flashed red, a massive storm cloud looming ahead, its edges jagged and angry. The plane shook harder, the turbulence rattling the overhead. Bins. Passengers gasped, some clutching their armrests, others whispering prayers. Richard Holt pushed toward the cockpit door, his face flushed. "I don't believe her. She's a fraud." Claire Donovan, her confidence shaken but not gone, joined in, sarcastic. Better to pray than trust her. A few others nodded, their fear outweighing their shame. Josh blocked the door, his voice firm. "Stay back. Let her work." Anna didn't turn. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her hands never wavered. She adjusted the controls, her eyes narrowing as she found a gap in the storm, a razor-thin path through the chaos. Her fingers moved with a precision that silenced Ryan, his earlier skepticism replaced by a quiet awe. Outside, Lily's small voice cut through the noise. Hopeful. "She's going to save us, Mommy. I know it." Ellen hugged her tighter, her own tears falling now. A man in a gray suit, his briefcase monogrammed, stood up, his voice booming, indignant. "This is unacceptable. I've got a meeting in New York tomorrow, and I'm not dying because of some wannabe pilot." His words sparked a new wave of panic, passengers murmuring, some shouting agreement. Anna's hand tightened on the yoke, her knuckles paling for a moment. She glanced at the radar, the storm's red mass pulsing like a heartbeat. Her lips moved silently, counting something. Altitudes, headings, maybe memories. She adjusted. The throttle. Her movement smooth like she'd done this 1,000 times. The man kept shouting, but his voice faded as the plane steadied, Anna's hands guiding it through the shaking. Ryan leaned closer, his voice low. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Anna didn't answer, but her eyes flicked to him, just for a second, and that was enough. The plane dipped, then climbed, threading through the clouds like a needle through fabric. The turbulence eased, then stopped. The cabin lights flickered, and for a moment, everything was still. Then the plane burst free of the storm, the sky opening up, clear and blue. The passengers erupted in applause, their cheers loud enough to shake the walls. Lily stood on her chair, clapping wildly. "Miss, you saved us!" Ellen pulled her down, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't stop clapping. Richard Holt sank back into his seat, his face pale. Claire Donovan stared at her hands, her nails digging into her palms. Susan Grayson looked away, her glasses fogging slightly. Anna kept her eyes on the instruments, guiding the plane toward the nearest airport. Ryan leaned toward her, his voice low, soft, amazed. "How'd you do that?" Anna didn't answer. She just kept working, her lips pressed tight. A memory surfaced, quiet but heavy. A small apartment, a single lamp casting shadows on the wall. Anna sat at a table, her hands folded around a coffee mug, a folded flag in a wooden case on the shelf behind her. Her husband's flag. A photo next to it showed them together, young, laughing, his arm around her shoulders, a jet in the background. She'd stared at that photo for hours after the news came, her face blank, her hands steady. She'd walked away from the Navy, from the call sign, from the life. But the sky had a way of pulling her back. Now, in the cockpit, her fingers moved. With the same steadiness, the same resolve, the plane descended, the landing gear humming as it locked into place. The passengers' cheers grew louder, but Anna's face stayed calm, her eyes fixed on the runway lights ahead. The plane touched down, smooth and controlled, the wheels kissing, the tarmac with barely a jolt. The cabin erupted again, this time in sobs and cheers. Ellen hugged Lily, whispering, relieved. "She did it. She really did it." Anna unbuckled her seat belt, stood, and slung her backpack over her shoulder, her face as calm as it had been in 12C. Josh opened the cockpit door, his hands shaking slightly, and stepped aside. The passengers watched her emerge, their applause, faltering as they saw her, still in that faded hoodie, those scuffed sneakers. A man in a tweed jacket, his glasses perched on his nose, whispered to his wife, "She doesn't even look proud." "Who is she?" His wife shook her head, her eyes wet. Anna walked down the aisle, her step steady, her gaze fixed ahead. Lily waved her coloring book, the plane drawing now complete, a bright sun above it. Anna's lips curved, just enough to notice, then she kept walking. The airport was chaos. Reporters swarmed the gates, their cameras flashing through the windows. Passengers spilled out of the plane, some still shaking, others talking over each other, their voices a mix of awe and shame. Richard Holt avoided Anna's gaze, his suit jacket slung over his arm. Claire Donovan hurried past, her heels clicking fast on the tarmac. A journalist pushed through the crowd, his microphone raised. "Please, your name." Anna kept walking, her hoodie pulled low. Susan Grayson, her face gray, muttered to her assistant, "God forbid she tells them what happened on that plane." Tom stood off to the side, his eyes locked on Anna, his hand raised in a quiet salute. A young woman in a denim jacket, a college student who'd been silent the whole flight, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Thank you." Anna paused just for a second, her eyes meeting the woman's, then nodded and kept moving. A man in a black coat, his face lined with years of corporate deals, stood near the gate, his phone pressed to his ear. "No, I'm not exaggerating. She flew the damn plane and we all treated her like garbage." He glanced at Anna, his eyes dropping to the floor as she passed. Anna's backpack strap slipped slightly, and she adjusted it, her fingers brushing the tiny jet keychain. The metal caught the light, and for a moment, Tom's eyes widened, recognizing it, a pilot's keepsake, the kind you earned after years in the sky. He opened his mouth to say something, but Anna was already moving, her steps steady, her silence louder than the reporter's shouts. The Department of Defense arrived, black. SUVs pulling up, their doors slamming. A stern officer, Colonel Daniels, approached, his boots heavy on the ground. He stopped in front of Anna, his eyes narrowing, then softening. He saluted, sharp and precise. "Welcome back, Night Viper 12. We thought you were KIA." The crowd froze. Passengers gasped, some dropping to their knees, their heads bowed. Richard Holt's face went white, his phone slipping from his hand. Claire Donovan covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Susan Grayson turned away, her shoulders slumped. Anna returned the salute, her hand steady, then lowered it. She didn't say a word. A reporter, his camera still rolling, shouted, "Night Viper 12! Who is she?" Colonel Daniels glanced at him, his voice firm, definitive. "A hero." "That's all you need to know?" Anna's eyes flicked to the side, catching Lily waving her drawing, and her hand twitched, like she wanted to wave back. But she didn't. Another memory, softer this time. A beach at sunset, the waves crashing, gently. Anna and her husband walked barefoot, their hands linked, her laughter mixing with the sound of the surf. He'd given her the ring she still wore, the one she'd touched in the cockpit. "You're my wingman," he'd said, his voice warm. She'd smiled, her eyes on the horizon, the sky endless above them. Then the call came, the mission that took him. She had buried that life, buried Night Viper 12. But the sky had other plans. Now as she walked through the airport, the weight of that ring grounded her, a quiet reminder of who she'd been, who she still was. The reporters kept shouting, but she didn't stop, her steps carrying her past the chaos, past the shame of those who judged her. The fallout came fast. Richard Holt, the hedge fund guy, got a call from his board the next day. His mockery of Anna, caught on a passenger's phone, went viral on X, his name trending with hashtags like classless in the clouds. By evening, he was fired, his career in ruins. Claire Donovan, the socialite, saw her sponsorship deals vanish, her face plastered across blogs with headlines like "Influencer Shamed for Mid-Flight Tirade." Susan Grayson's law firm distanced itself from her, her clients dropping after passengers tweeted about her screams. Senator Vance faced a quiet backlash, his donors whispering about his inaction during the crisis. The man in the linen suit, a real estate mogul named Greg Thornton, found his latest deal canceled, his investors citing reputational concerns after his comments hit the news. None of them faced Anna directly. They didn't need to. The truth was out, and it was heavy. Anna walked away from the airport, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hoodie still pulled low. The reporters shouted questions, but she didn't stop. Tom watched her go, his eyes wet, his hand still raised in that salute. Lily and Ellen stood by the gate, Lily waving her empty hands, her drawing gone. Anna glanced back, just once, her eyes catching the crowd, the cameras, the chaos. Her lips didn't move, but her gaze was enough, a quiet acknowledgement of the weight she'd carried, the storm she'd flown through. Colonel Daniels followed her for a few steps, then stopped, like he knew she didn't want company. The crowd parted, their whispers fading as she moved through them, a ghost reborn, her call sign echoing in their minds. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with Whisper Fable through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally, healing.